Hey folks, David Stewart here. It's time to deliver on an often requested video. It's time to talk about the Mandela Effect. What is the Mandela Effect? Well, the Mandela Effect is probably best described, or most sensibly described, as a mass misremembering of events or names or something like that. And I know that there's already a lot of videos out there and people have already generated a lot of content about this. I want to say as a prelude to this, I haven't actually watched any of it. Okay, so I know other people have done the content, so if I'm copying someone, trust me, it's purely coincidental. I haven't looked up anybody else's thoughts on this. So what does my skeptical brain say? Well, my skeptical brain says that people are very capable of misremembering things. Which means that if an individual is capable of misremembering things, that means that large numbers of people may be capable of misremembering things. And one of the things I noticed about most of the examples of the Mandela Effect is there are things that are of little consequence to whoever is misremembering the particular event or thing. And I may get into that a little bit later, but they're not of a big consequence. Now, the Mandela Effect gets its name from a mass misremembering of Nelson Mandela. A lot of people misremember that he died in prison, not that he was released from prison and became, the president of South Africa. So that's where it gets its name from. Now, I said things were inconsequential. To my knowledge, most of the people who misremember the events surrounding Nelson Mandela are not South Africans. So to an American, Nelson Mandela's life or death may actually be quite inconsequential, even though he's far from inconsequential to the history of South Africa or the region in particular. So that's something that, unfortunately, that's the reality there. Other examples include like the spelling of Chick-fil-A, the spelling of Berenstain Bears as Berenstein Bears, and I actually remembered it as Berenstein Bears. But of course, when I remember it, I remember my mom calling it Berenstein Bears because I couldn't read that well yet. So I just called it what I knew it as, not me carefully reading all the syllables that happened to be on a book or a show or something like that. So that's the main thing, is that it's something that's rather inconsequential. And what you have to understand is that people's memories are not perfect, and memories are not like a camcorder recording. Like, this camera is recording what I'm saying right now pretty objectively, just like normal. So our memories, however, are not like that. Memories are written like the way that you would write a story, the way that you'd write a book. So memories are written, they're not recorded the way that a camcorder records them. And that's because our brains are taking so much data all the time. They're constantly in this process of filtering out what's relevant and what's irrelevant, and trying to make memories that are going to be useful in the future. That's the important thing. So we tend to assemble stories out of things that we remember, little pieces that we remember. And in some cases, we may have several events that are spaced out over time, and you assemble those into some sort of narrative. And that's how you understand the past, is that you have created a narrative, you created a story for how that past works. It's the same way with news. I've said this before. It's like people don't remember facts. You don't just remember factoids sitting around, regardless of how tall Mount Whitney is here in California. Great tourist destination. It's you tend to remember stories. So you remember how the events relate. You remember who did what happened, motivations, times, places, that sort of stuff. You're not going to remember the killer's shoes because that doesn't seem relevant. You're going to remember, unless he left footprints, and then all of a sudden you're going to care about somebody's shoes if it's like a story about a murder or something like that. So we make memories in the same way. So that means that we can make false memories in the same way. Or as we go, there's sort of like an automatic error correction that's always going on. We're always checking what we see in the present against what we see in the past. And that cognitive dissonance that is sort of the Mandela Effect is us saying, wait a minute, this is not jiving with this fact that I recorded earlier, this memory that I recorded earlier. Which one is the real memory? That's how I sort of describe the Mandela Effect. Now, the other part of it is that it's, besides the fact that it tends to be inconsequential, it also tends to be a mass misremembering. And all I could say to that is that if one person operates one way, then other people may operate in the same way. That we're not quite as unique and individual as we all like to think. And the human memory is, and the human brain is a really, really great device, a really, really great machine. It's more, our soul obviously I feel like is more than that. But when it comes to the way that we operate up here, we tend to operate kind of in a similar fashion because we're all the same species, and we were subjected to a lot of the same evolutionary pressures. It's why reactions like fear are so powerful in people. It's because our ancestors' fear caused them to get away from things, and so now in the modern environment where there's less to fear, fear can still be very potently used to control people. Now, let's get over to some of the more odder explanations, because I like to think about this as not just like some rationalist over here, but as like an author, as a story writer. And to me, I think that there's a lot of really rich fields there, and some of those have already been explored, although we wouldn't connect them with this idea of the Mandela Effect right now. So one of the best ones I think is a movie, one of my favorite movies. It's called Dark City. And in it, basically people have their memories erased and reimplanted very, very frequently by a race of aliens that are trying to test people's adaptability to things that are unfamiliar, to lots of strange situations. They're trying to test as many different like crisscrossings of people with different memories as possible to see why people are so adaptable and why they survive so well, because their species is like dying out. And if we take that, then it's this old sort of Platonic shadows on the cave wall question, which is, what is reality? Are we really perceiving reality as it is? And I think when you go and you look at the way people's memories are written, the answer is no. We don't really perceive reality as it is. We construct our reality out of things that we're presented with that appear useful to our survival and things like that. So the shorthand, the long answer, I know that's a long answer. We don't really understand our reality. We construct our reality because reality itself is far too complex for any person to understand. The other thing is we don't, the vast majority of our knowledge isn't generated firsthand. It's not recorded like we're recording on the camcorder. It's, somebody told you this, or you read it in a book, or you saw somebody else's recording on it, and that's the way that you start to assemble your knowledge of the world. The same way if you're gonna hire someone to like build a fence, it's like you ask your neighbor, is this person good? And he's like, no, he's bad. You haven't had a bad experience with that person, but you've just created knowledge about that person secondhand. And that's really, really valuable, by the way, because we don't want to have to do everything by trial and error as individuals. That's the way societies grow, is that as a whole unit of people, we do enough trial and error individually and share enough information that we can get out of the muck and get to the next level. So that's an important part. If we didn't construct our reality, we wouldn't have the society that we have. It's a really, really important thing to remember. Another movie that taps into this is The Matrix. And The Matrix really, really hammers it home hard. And the first time I saw The Matrix, I had no idea what to expect. And it was really getting blown away when that red pill scene happens. It had a big, big impact in the cinema at the time. And of course, I'd already seen Dark City, but I didn't know what to expect with this Matrix thing. It was really, really sort of explosive. And the whole idea of The Matrix is that they're in a simulation. This was also explored in a story, I'm trying to remember who wrote it, called Simulation 13. And in that, you have this idea that people are walking around and they don't realize that they're in a simulated reality. Because the simulated reality doesn't tell you that it's a simulation, and if all you've experienced is the simulation, you have nothing to compare it to. It really is like shadows on the cave wall. You have no other reality with which to sort of consult and decide if that's false. So instead, in The Matrix, you have Neo, who's just sort of plunged out of the Matrix and into a reality that's completely unfamiliar and bizarre. And which also, in turn, ends up sort of begging the next question, which is, which one is really the Matrix, right? Is the reality that Neo's experiencing, how does he know that that's reality and not some other simulation, not some other Matrix that he's just gone the next level up? Or, he's been sort of controlled by the machines to think that there's this other reality, when in reality, there's no other reality, that everyone's still in the Matrix and he hasn't begun to conceive of the limitations of the Matrix. And that plot was there just to sort of stop it. All of those are sort of very, very rich story ideas, and I think you can think even broader. Some people, I think, have talked about like parallel realities. That what you have as the Mandela effect is, you have a bunch of parallel realities, and somehow your brain or your spirit or whatever it is, your psyche is connected to many of these realities. And when one dies off or something happens in one, you can end up having a connection with that, or you can slip between close realities and you end up making a memory from a fairly close reality that then gets carried over into reality that's a little bit different from that. And the realities have to be close enough that you can slip between them, which means that the things that you misremember are, by definition, pretty inconsequential. So, nobody misremembers that there's dinosaurs roaming the earth. People misremember that a politician that they never knew or cared about, other than seeing him probably on 60 Minutes a couple of times, didn't die in prison, or that Berenstain Bears was not written Berenstein Bears like a standard Jewish name. But there's also like weird like anti-Jewish conspiracies surrounding that, I bet. And or that Chick-fil-A is spelled different, or this used to be a different color, or something like that. All these sort of like misremembering of little details that don't really seem that consequential to what's actually happening. That would only be possible if those realities were pretty close. The difference between the realities when I misremembered it was that Nelson Mandela had died, and then eventually those realities sort of diverged and went far enough away that we can't interact with that reality where like Nelson Mandela died in prison and maybe apartheid like never ended, which would be another interesting thing. Alternative history is a pretty rich field to explore in literary terms. Some other things that I think, if I want to get a little bit tinfoil hat and what you can think about, and you can think about this as a story, is that if it's easy to get people, if people easily misremember something, and you combine that with the fact that people don't interact with reality as it is, they construct their reality, and you combine that with the fact that it's easy to influence people using a large number of rhetorical and psychological devices, you then have the ability to forge people's memories without them knowing it here in the real world. And I'll just give you an example. I've given this in some other videos, is that if you were to go on a Facebook wall right after Donald Trump was elected president, you'd see the same people that have nothing to do with each other. And I saw this on my Facebook wall, and everybody I knew saw the exact same thing on Facebook, which means it's like it's the same, everything's the same about it. But we just have a bunch of different perspectives collecting this data. Bunch of people that never knew each other, they're all saying the same 5 words: racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, bigot, Nazi. Actually there's probably like closer to 10 words, but 5 or 6 of those are like, bam, they are always the same. They're saying the same words every time. Why are they saying the same words every time? Well, it's because they've actually been programmed to think those things and to connect the concept of Donald Trump with these words on a large scale, but just through repetition. They're all watching the same media. If you can get everybody to watch the same thing, then everybody can be programmed the same way. And that's why alternative media can be pretty dangerous to the status quo and to thought, because it makes people think in different ways and stop accepting the standard narrative, to ask for a different story that's concocted out of the same facts, to compare it, then see those 2 stories and compare like which one is the more real story there, which is a dangerous idea. So people could actually be mass programmed to misbelieve or misremember something, because like I said, you're forging a memory, you're writing a memory, you're not recording it. So if you tell somebody the same thing over and over and over again, they may just start believing that thing is true and that they remember it that way. Like if you tell people Nelson Mandela died in prison over and over again, they may not realize that they've been told that over and over again. After a couple of years, they just have programmed that into their reality. Their reality field contains this particular factoid, and then only later, when that's penetrated by some other thing, are they like, wait a minute, that's not right. So who knows like what you could actually get people to massively misremember. You may get them to misremember en masse something about a particular past president, something that happened as a point of history, and I think that there are probably examples out there of that, of the idea that like I don't know, there's probably if we look at Bill Clinton's presidency, you're probably going to see some people that are going to really misremember some facts about that particular presidency because of their political affiliation and with what information they've been presented with. They may not really remember that we bombed Kosovo. I meet people all the time that are my age, and they're like, "What do you mean there was a war in Kosovo?" And I'm like, "How do you not remember this?" Well, they don't remember it because they haven't been reminded of it, and while it was going on, they were easily distracted by other things. So they just misremember that ever existed. It goes just like into that memory hole. There it goes. And that's another lesson from 1984, is that our memory and our understanding of reality is malleable, and that's a frightening thought. So I'll leave you guys with that frightening thought. Give me your thoughts down below. Let me know what you want to see and hear in the future, and give me some examples of the Mandela Effect, and tell me some other ways that you could get people to misremember things, and to what end, because that's the other thing about like misremembering Nelson Mandela. Is like, to what end would you reprogram him? Would you, maybe we're in a simulation and all the people on this side haven't had their code recompiled to remember what they altered in the code at some other point. Maybe we're all just simulations, like in Simulation 13. We're little computer programs who think we're conscious, and we're conscious only because we're running very, very complex sets of code. And we are ourselves coding computers, which is really weird to think about. So, give me some examples. Give me some of your thoughts. Give me some of your creative ideas about it. I want to hear them all. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check my links down below. You can read samples of my books at dvspress.com. You can find more about everything I do at davidvstewart.com. And don't forget to check out Writers of the Dawn podcast. That content is ongoing. So if you're interested in story writing content, we have a lot of it up there. You guys have a great, great day.